Previously on agentpalmer.com, odds crashed the time machine reminiscent of Cheerleader, Eels, and Cars. Rocket Men defines Apollo 11 mission better than anything, and as Rob and I have proven, even if your collection is complete, you're still not done collecting. This is the Palmer Files, episode 108, featuring Eric Smith, a literary agent and author who has written books of all kinds and represented all kinds of authors. He's here to discuss the publishing industry, his writing process, reading habits, and much, much more. Are you ready? Let's do the show! Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 108th episode is Eric Smith, a literary agent and author who's here to peel back the mystique of the publishing industry. He's written many books, including Don't Read the Comments, You Can Go Your Own Way, Jagged Little Pill based on the award-winning musical, and coming soon, With or Without You, a modern Romeo and Juliet, but instead of rival families, they hail from rival food trucks. During the conversation, you will hear how Eric got into the publishing industry, being an author, traditional media, the accessibility of publishing, young adult fiction, musicals, juggling it all, book marketing, and well, all of that and a whole lot more is coming your way shortly. But first, remember that if you want to discuss the episode as you listen or afterwards, you can find all contact information for Eric and myself in the show notes. There, you can find more information about my guest, Eric Smith, at Eric's site, ericsmithrocks.com. Again, that's ericsmithrocks.com. Don't forget, you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com, and of course, email can be sent to thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's turn the page. Eric, I just want to make it simple to start. I know that you're a literary agent and an author, and probably you wear many more hats than that. So if I had met you at a party and I was like, so what do you do? What's your first answer?
Oh, that's a good question. Usually I try to skirt around what I do when I meet people at random parties and events. I'll say like, oh, I work in publishing, and I'm a dad. And that's usually it, and I try to move on from it. But yeah, I mean, like the real answer would be, yeah, I'm a literary agent. I've been an agent for, oh goodness, about 8 years now, and I've worked in publishing for about 15 years. Yeah, when I'm not working on other people's books, I try to work on my own now and again. And yeah, my 11th young adult book comes out in November. So just next month or whenever someone is listening to this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I first of all, I'm kind of shocked by your answer, because to me, it is the YouTubers and podcasters and internet personalities that have to skirt around the topic. Because you're still in a traditional medium. But it's also the reason I wanted to talk to you, because like I have helped edit a friend of mine's book of poetry that I also helped him self-publish. And I edited the first go of his novel that he put on a shelf. We all know these people. And I'm helping him work on his second book of poetry. And I'm also a voracious reader. And so the publishing industry is kind of a curiosity to me, because I think I followed you on the social medias for a while before I reached out, but there was a while about a year ago, 2 years ago, when I really was like, I want to talk to an agent. I want to know what they do. And I just reached out and like nobody got back to me. And I understand like everybody's busy, but it was like the one piece of like I've talked to music people, like they're not hard. Like, I don't know. There's something about the literary world that still seems inaccessible.
No, I hear you. And I mean, there's a lot of people doing really good work to make it a little more accessible. That is for sure.
Okay.
There's lots of free virtual conferences and all kinds of things like that that help writers kind of get their questions answered. But I do kind of get people not responding to like interviews and podcasts and stuff just because it can take a lot of time. A lot of agents I know have day jobs in addition to their agenting life. So sometimes they're only agenting at night. Sometimes they're only agenting early in the day. A lot of agents are lawyers and other sort of gigs there. So time can be a little precious.
So it feels like that's kind of on par with the authors. Like I in my experience, very few authors are just writers anymore. They have a podcast or an interview show, or they have a real day job. Like very few people are true. Well, my job's to write. I mean, not counting journalists, but like for authors, like do they exist anymore?
No, they absolutely exist.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a couple clients who are full-time writers. That's all they do. Some of them, they're full-time writers where they just work on their books. Some of them are full-time writers who work on their books and they also do journalism, like you were saying. Some of them adjunct on the side as well as write full-time to sort of supplement the income there. But no, there's a lot of full-time writers out there.
Okay. All right. I'm a blogger, so I consider myself a writer.
Yeah.
I like the term blogger, by the way. For anybody out there listening, it's like I don't want to necessarily consider myself a journalist, though I guess I would be a features writer.
Okay.
But I also don't want to consider myself a writer because it is, for better or worse, fairly light fare. So I like the term blogger. It fits very well right in between those two worlds.
And whatever works, my friend.
Yeah. So I know that the literary agent thing. I just want to ask, where does this come about? Because I think our younger selves, like we want to be authors or artists or astronauts, but nobody ever wants to be like a manager or, you know what I mean? Like we want, like in sports terms, like we want to be the shortstop. Nobody wants to be the manager. Like that's, and so I'm curious, like, did you always want to be an author? And then like, was like the literary agent thing just presented to you? Like, how does that come about?
Well, so when I was in my undergrad, when I was in grad school, I wanted to write and I wanted to work on people's books. That was it. I wanted to work in publishing.
Okay.
So when I moved to Philadelphia, my first job was at Quirk Books. It's a publisher here in my town that does, they're pretty famous for doing like Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children and Pride and Prejudice and Zombies and those sort of quirky mashups. And I was there for quite a while before I jumped into working as an agent. My original goal was to work as an editor. Okay. I was looking at publishing houses, trying to get a job as an editor there. And the agenting thing, I had worked on a couple of books for the agency that I work at now, where at Quirk, I was doing some of the marketing for them. And when I saw the position open, I was like, well, I've been in publishing at that point, I'd been in publishing for like 5 years. I'd done marketing for so many books. My first book had come out already in my author life. And I kind of felt like, well, I have the experience in a bunch of other places. I feel like that would make me good at being an agent. Like I know how the industry works in all these other spots. And they gave me a shot, and I'm very grateful that they did, for sure. And I've been doing that sort of ever since. So yeah, I mean, some of us do go in like wanting to work sort of on the books as opposed to writing them. I have a lot of agent friends who are firmly not writers, and they have told me again and again, even though I frequently ask them when they're going to write something, they are that's not what they do. They are readers. They are editors, and that's what they do. Yeah.
I think it's anything tangential to the writing process. Right. So I explained that I don't necessarily consider myself a writer or a journalist, and blogger feels nice, but you can't be a blogger without someone being like, so when are you going to write a book? Which is not like, I'm not, it's not a goal of mine. Maybe a long time ago it was, but it's not a goal of mine now. Or it's not an active goal. Like, I'm not blogging in order to build an audience with which to launch my book, because I have no idea for what I would write. Right. But like, I get that question all the time. And so I feel like it's kind of like, you're in that industry all the time. Somebody's gonna be like, well, come on. Like, you don't have an idea. Like, really? So I get where they're coming from, but I also think like there's got to be enough people within the industry that are like you, that are kind of on both sides of it, that like, people are like, oh, well, they make an assumption that like, well, of course all literary agents are also authors.
No. I mean, you'd be surprised at the amount of industry people who also write, though. Like Amber Oliver is an editor over at Bloomsbury and is a brilliant writer. Her debut novel comes out, I think, next year, or maybe the year after. Rebecca Podos is a literary agent who's also an author. Seth Fishman writes picture books in addition to representing some like huge titans of science fiction and fantasy. There's quite a few of us. Okay. I figure, if you're surrounded by books and you're surrounded by writing, there's that bug has got to be in there, which is why I probably pester all my friends about the book I'm convinced they're writing in secret.
Now, you can't talk about writing without reading. Is that kind of where it all starts for you? Like, you were a reader as a kid?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh man, I feel like I was like maybe a pretentious little kid because of my parents. They got me all those like children's illustrated classics books when I was like in first and second grade. So like I was this little first grader being like, I'm reading Moby Dick, even though it's like not written for the adults. It's sort of written down a little bit so kids can grasp it.
Yeah.
But I read all these classic books when I was young, and when I was, I don't know, sort of like in upper grade school and like junior high, I started reading like high fantasy and like big sci-fi novels, and I got really into Michael Crichton as like an 11-year-old.
You and I are in that same. Jurassic Park came out when I was 10 or 11, and I believe I read the novel first, or around the same time I saw the movie.
Yeah.
And that's not something I should have been doing. Like, because I reread it recently and I went, there are things in this book that I did not understand. Because
one of my I was gonna say one of my friends recently said that there are two kinds of writers. Eric Brown said this. He's an amazing YA author. He said there's two kinds of writers who read Stephen King too early, and writers who read V.C. Andrews too early, right? And like, I think that's like so spot on. I was a V.C. Andrews kid. I should not have read V.C. Andrews when I was in like 5th grade, but Flowers in the Attic, I read it.
Okay, I did not read either of those too early, but I did read. I want to say for me it's a weird split because I've story time. It was Tolkien and Asimov and Clark, right? Those were my big 3. And then at a certain point I just stopped reading, and when I came back to reading, that is, the fantasy came back right away. Like I was introduced to the Shannara oeuvre. And so I fell back into that, and I read a ton of nonfiction because I like to mix it up, and I read a ton of spy fiction. The sci-fi, I only in the last year and a half or 2 years started reading again. That was the one that for some reason didn't come back over. But I am always amazed at how, maybe not necessarily always to writing, but how reading is a clear early on, in that middle school, junior high era, is a clear line to being some kind of a creative later in life, even if it doesn't happen right away.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It feels like that. I want to ask though, when you get done with high school and you're like, I'm going to go to college, what are you going for at that point? Like, is writing still the thing?
Yeah. I mean, my first year of college, I was a theater major because I was convinced I was going to write plays. That was my plan there.
Okay.
And then I had a really awesome professor who was like, "Hey, you should be an English major. You'll be able to do more with that if you want to be a writer." And that was some tough love that I really needed. Okay. And I transferred to another college and got my bachelor's in English, and then I got my master's in English. And yeah, about a year and a half after I finished my master's, got my first publishing job, and that's been on that route ever since.
Wow.
So,
First of all, I'm supremely jealous. Just because I started my undergrad and having no idea what I was going to do, and that's exactly how I finished my undergrad.
Oh no!
You know, it's. I'm not alone. I'm aware, but it's just it makes me jealous of people who figured it out early. But I'm jealous, and I'm envious, but I'm happy. I'm also very happy for you though, because you get to kind of build something like on that foundation, as opposed to me where I have if we're building a pyramid, right? Like you're on level 4 or 5. I've got level 1 and 2 covered for miles. You know what I mean? Like I haven't figured out what I'm building up yet. I'm just still building my base. That's what I'm doing. You've written a lot of books across, I want to say, genres as well as audiences. Young adult, I guess regular adult. I don't know. Do you have a favorite, or do you like jumping back and forth or all over?
I mean, I think my heart is always going to be in young adult books. Like I feel like, like you were talking about, like figuring it out, going to college, knowing what you're going to do and everything. But there's still this part of me, and I feel like a lot of adults who also read young adult books and write young adult books feel the same way, that you still feel like you're 18 all the time, And
okay,
there's this.
I got to stop you. Is it 18 in your head?
Oh yeah, all the time. 18.
I'm younger, by the way. Like I'm forever 15 in my head. I don't. And I have read some young adult fiction, and I think it's probably more important for older people who don't know what they want to do to read young adult fiction, because it's all about decision making. Like, I don't want to pigeonhole it, but it feels like every young adult novel of any kind I've ever read is all about decision making.
No, I mean, you're right. I don't think that's pigeonholing it. A lot of YA, the story is about the journey of figuring out who you're going to be and what your place is like in the world. That's the coming of age arc in every coming of age book. Yeah. And I don't know, that's why I love it, because, it doesn't matter where you're at in your career or your life or your family or anything, like you're still trying to figure it out. I'm 40, and sometimes I still feel like I'm trying to figure it out. I think that's normal.
I think we should. Yeah. I get to be envious of you, but I'm also, not unhappy not knowing. Like, I think there's there's a part of me that always thinks that I hope I never meet anybody who's like the Woody Allen character that's like, oh, I read the end of the book just so in case I die, I'll always know the ending. But like, I like the idea that I never know until I turn the last page. Like, I think it's that, I think that unknowingness is important. It's why I'm comfortable with I don't know. And when if you and I were hanging out right now and we came upon some kind of trivia question, I'm never going to reach for my phone to look it up. I'm okay not knowing. Like, that's where I've become now.
Nice. That's good. That sounds healthy.
Well, I mean, we all try in our little ways, you know? I did want to ask though, do you have a writing process that works like no matter what?
Yeah. So oh goodness, and this drives my poor critique partners a little crazy. So when I write a book, I write a giant synopsis. So I basically write out everything that will happen in the book.
Okay.
It's like a giant Wikipedia page for the book. And I describe every little thing. So usually the synopsis can be 15, 20 pages long of what I think the entire plot's going to be. And then I sit down and I madly write the book. So all of my books, I'm like looking at the stack right now, at least most of them were written between, I mean, the fastest I've written a book is 10 days. That was Don't Read the Comments. I wrote the book in 10 days. And the longest was probably recently With or Without You, which comes out in November. And that one I wrote in like, I think the first draft of it I wrote in like 6 months. And that doesn't mean those drafts are good. Those drafts are usually terrible.
Well, they're drafts,
but
right? You know.
Yeah, drafts. Yeah. So I get the entire story out, and then I can sit there and I can take my time and I can fix it up and I can polish it. I go back, I reread it a million times while I'm fixing it up and putting it into better shape. And that's what my process is like. I have a lot of friends who will, they'll write a rough draft and then they'll erase the draft and they'll write another one and then they'll erase and write another one. And like, for me, I write that first horrible draft with everything I want in it. And then I just keep going back and fixing it and fixing it and fixing it and fixing it. It helps a lot with deadlines. My book, You Can Go Your Own Way, that book sold in like 2020 and it had to come out in 2021. And let me tell you, that's a rough time to be writing anything when you have a little child running around and you're stuck in your house.
Yeah.
So having that giant synopsis, like that saved my life with that book, like I was able to get it out and sort of figure out the story. So I don't know if anyone's listening and struggling with getting that book done. I'm telling you, giant synopsis. Your critique partners will hate it. No one wants to read your giant synopsis, but it's going to help you a whole bunch.
I see. I find that obviously blogs are on a much smaller scale, but I have to. I'm kind of in that boat with you where I have to get it all out and I write the whole thing, and it's mainly a mess. But I have to, and I don't know if this is part of your process. I have to put it away. Like I need at least a day, sometimes 2 or 3, where I can kind of forget what the next word is going to be when I start going back to read it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that space is probably, sadly, for me right now, that space is the most important part. And it's really hard to explain that to people. Where it's like, no, I can't, I need to forget that this comes after that because it's going to mess up my own editing process. That's kind of why we want other people to look at our stuff because they don't know what's coming next. But 10 days, man, that's insane.
That was, Don't Read the Comments. I went on a writing retreat with some friends. It was a 10-day writing retreat. I had the whole synopsis written and I was like, well, when else am I going to get this kind of time to like sit here in the woods in a cabin with a bunch of my pals? So I just got it done. And I mean, I think that's probably one of my most popular books. So it was good that I got it out of the way.
I mean, it's got a great title. I mean, and it's basically words to live by.
It's true.
Now, I would be remiss if I didn't go back and ask you, do you still want to write a play?
I do. That is my sort of bucket list goal. My best friend from childhood, who I've known since I was 6, he now has his PhD in music composition, and he's a marching band director. And we said, when we both turn 40, it's time to write the musical. And he turned 40 back in July, so it's time. I got to do it.
So it's not just a play. You're going full on musical. Yeah,
that's what we want to do. I feel like I got my toe in the door a little bit already with Jagged Little Pill. So now I just have to do it. We just gotta come up with an idea. That's the thing.
Yeah, it's I want to like musicals, but I say that with an asterisk because I did the stage crew stuff in middle, high, and college. Anytime that we did a play, it was fine. Like I was fine. It was fine. Plays are fine.
Yeah.
But anytime we did a musical, I knew the words better than the actors. I just got frustrated because I'm not a singer. I'm not really a performer as such, but like when I'm sitting there manning the soundboard or the lights and I know every word to this.
Yeah.
I don't need to know every word to Shenandoah. I've tried to block out as much of that musical as possible, but I'm sure on occasion lines pop into my head. They will always do that. And that's why I want to like music. I think I can watch, I can still watch them once and enjoy them.
Yes.
But I don't think I will ever want to watch a musical again. and that's just the scars from having sat through those things. And to be honest, you'd think I'd feel the same way about plays because it's the same stuff every night. But for some reason, those musicals were written in a way that just tickled and tortured my brain. And I'm like, musicals. So I guess I get to ask you then, why musicals? Like, why not just a play? Is it you want to work and collaborate with your friend, which I understand, or is it something more?
Yeah, I mean, collaborating with my friend is definitely one of the things, but musicals and theater were like my big gateway into being a creative when I was younger. A fun little thing I don't talk about often, but when I was in 6th grade, me and a bunch of friends were cast in A Christmas Carol on Broadway. We were part of the original cast of the Broadway production. We sing on the soundtrack and everything. And like that was it, man. I was just like, oh my God, this is something I want to make a big part of my life. I was in the High School Musicals growing up. I actively went to see them as often as I could when I was, in my 20s and 30s. There's a favorite sort of date night thing for me for sure. And then, I ended up writing the Jagged Little Pill book, tying into the musical. So it's just, I don't know, they followed me my whole life.
I mean, there's like a part of me that wants to be like, I wish you all the best. Just don't put too much pressure on yourself. And I feel like you have to have been there from that other side, right? Like as an agent, where I presume you wear all the hats, right? Like editor and psychologist and therapist and friend and like emotional support human. Like I feel like you wear all the hats. So like you've seen kind of like I don't want to say this in any other uncertain terms, but basically you've seen the worst of the creative process when there's a deadline.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I'm definitely not putting any I don't know, pressure or expectations on the musical idea down the line, just because I know how nearly impossible it is to make it happen. So we're not stressing too much.
So with no rush, then you have plenty of time to come up with ideas, but you're also writing other things. I'm sure you've got other ideas for other books. And you're still probably reading. Are you reading for pleasure?
Oh Yeah, all the time.
Okay, so you're reading for pleasure, and you're probably reading as an agent to understand, to help out. So, like, how do you keep it all together? Like, how do you keep it all organized in your brain? And I'm asking as somebody who literally reads one book at a time.
So, okay, so Nora Roberts, the brilliant romance author, has this. She has this great quote, and I'm gonna mess it up a little bit, but she talks about how, when it comes to her writing life and her family life and pretty much everything that surrounds her, she looks at the process a little bit like juggling, and how when you're that consumed by all this stuff, you start to realize that some of the balls you're juggling are made of plastic and some of them are made of glass, right?
Okay.
So you keep the ones made of glass in the air and you let the plastic ones fall by the wayside, right? So for me, the glass ones are my clients, right? So the authors that I work with, they are the ones I can't drop. They are the ones I can't let slip. They are my responsibility. They're counting on me. They're counting on me to help their careers flourish. My family and my friends, they also fall into the glass space, and the plastic things, honestly, are my own writing. Like my own creative efforts, they can get dropped. Nothing bad's gonna happen to other people if I'm not focusing on my book, or I'm not focusing on that musical idea, or I'm not reading a new rom-com that I've been looking forward to because I have to focus on a client book. So that's really how I keep it all together. I think about who is glass and who is plastic. And my therapist would be very mad at me if I told her, hey, I'm plastic, I can get dropped. But that's kind of the truth, like I got to focus on the people who need me first.
Okay. I think I may need to start thinking about that, because I keep, I'm at this point, I'm a free agent consultant, jack of all trades person.
Okay.
I would love to have a full-time job. It just doesn't seem like it's in the cards right now, but I'm surrounded by people with full-time jobs that I am a broken record trying to remind them when everything is a priority, nothing is a priority.
Ooh, yes.
And so I feel like this, plastic and glass dichotomy works very well for that, because I've been in marketing professionally for basically my entire professional career in some capacity. I mean, I've worn a lot of hats. I can't tell you I'm a this or a that, but like, just if there's a hat in marketing I've worn, or that I haven't worn, I'd be shocked. But like, it is one of those weird things where people will come to you and say, this is a priority, and you'll have 5 people come to you with priorities. They're not all equal. Like they just can't be. So
that's true.
So I get that. I was also blessed that my first boss was like, we're in marketing. No one lives or dies because this campaign is early, late, on time. Like it's fine. Like the sun will still rise. And I think,
yes,
I read a lot of books, nonfiction specifically, about like the history of technology, and the space race is a personal, hot topic for me. It's very weird to read that, the development of, say, like the personal computer was life and death, when you read about, the space race where people could literally die. Yeah. And so it's just everybody's got their own personal priorities, but like at the end of the day, it's up to you. And the outside is not saying, Eric Smith, this is your glass and this is your like that's not, we have that control,
Yeah.
I like that. I think it's, yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to selfishly ask a question though. I feel like not being a full book blogger because I write about lots of different things.
Mhm.
I haven't really joined the community, but I know there are book reviewers out there that exist in the world as independents like myself that are just like, I like this book. I'll read it. And I'll write about it. But the internet's a very weird place. It gives and it takes. Have you had a positive, negative, or indifferent experience with the review community, which, let's be real, over the last 20 years has changed from being just whatever the New York Times, Sunday edition book, club says to, potentially what I say.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I haven't had any no negative or anything experiences there. Plenty of people haven't liked my books, but that's fine. That's their, yeah. I don't.
Yeah.
When the book comes out, it's not mine anymore. It belongs to everybody else. So people can say whatever they want about it. That's not my conversation to be in. That's the reader's conversation, the reviewer's conversations. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think I've had any negative experiences. I've had lots of positive ones. People tagging me in beautiful photos they've taken with the books in them, or saying hi to me at a bookstore or a convention. Like that's always wonderful. But the negative, I don't know. I don't think I have any of it because I don't go looking for it. You know.
I will say that, but I will also add, I will say that that's generally probably the healthiest way to do it. But where I don't know which, did you decide that, like when the book is published, it's not yours anymore? Cause I feel like that is almost words to live by for anyone putting anything out in the world, period. And I think that a lot of people, and I'll say myself included, I have a hard time letting go of like even a post when I hit publish. Like was that always the case with you? Did you learn it?
I'm trying to think when I learned it. I probably learned it after book 2. My first book was a nonfiction pop culture book, and then my second book was my first YA novel. And I definitely do remember just like scouring Goodreads when the first YA novel came out. And I quickly realized, oh, this isn't healthy. What am I doing? I did that a little bit when Don't Read the Comments was on its way. And I had to stop myself. I was like, okay, I need to remove myself from this space, because the review space isn't for authors. It's for readers and reviewers to have conversations in. And once you do that, I don't know, it's healthier for you. It's healthier for that space, because there are endless stories of authors who decide to go after book bloggers or Goodreads readers, and that's not good for anybody. That doesn't do anyone any good.
Yeah, I did want to ask you, because you said you learned it after your second or around your third book. Is there, and obviously, look, you're not writing the same book over and over again, so every book is different. But like, as far as the process for writing, editing, publishing, going through the all of the marketing stuff, has it gotten easier the more and more you've published, or everything's changing so much it's just kind of the same, or it gets harder? Like what is that like for like any potential author out there, when I think we can both be like, yeah, it'll get slightly easier after the first one, but like, I don't know what the rest of the process, I don't think enough people talk about the rest of the process. Like, yeah, there's writing and there's editing and then there's this book, but like, then there's marketing and publicity and all the other stuff.
Yeah. So it's all going to change based on the publishing house that you're at, right? It's all going to be different. So like my first YA novel was digital only, right? So it was a digital only book. It's a digital exclusive of Bloomsbury. And the hiccup there is that, like, a lot of reviewers only want to get a physical arc, and a lot of main trade publications don't review books unless they can have a physical copy. So that book didn't get reviewed in a lot of places, and That wasn't the best experience. I was a little concerned about how it was going to do and who was going to read it and how it was going to get to readers. So when my first like print YA novel came out, The Girl in the Grove, it was a completely different experience because early copies were going out to places. I could sign copies, places I can go to book festivals. Um, but then from that book to Don't Read the Comments, that was also wildly different because The Girl in the Grove was with a publisher called Flux, who's like a small sort of indie kidlit publisher. They do great books, but they're small, like they have small print runs. They're not in every single bookstore. Don't Read the Comments was with Inkyard Press, who is a Harlequin and HarperCollins publisher. So suddenly I had a hardcover book. Suddenly I was going to bigger events and bigger bookstores and seeing it everywhere and going into getting special UK editions. It had a special edition in Australia. So things are going to change publisher to publisher. There's no one like uniform experience across the board. It's gonna be different. I think the thing that stays the same across the board is remembering that you as the author, you are on the publisher's team. They're on your team, you're on their team, and books are only successful when you're all working together. A book doesn't just come out and things happen, right? Like you have to be out there talking to people and going to bookstores and interacting with your local librarian and just doing everything you can to make it a success on your end, the same way the publisher is, if not more. So, yeah, that's the thing that's the same is doing the hustling, and you have to be willing to do that stuff.
So when you look at the stack of books with your name on the spine, and it's not a small stack anymore. What is that like? Like, I know you said when you publish them, they're no longer yours, but like, do you look at that, pile and you think back to where you are as you look down all the spines, or is it like, I want to do more? Do you not look back? Like, what is that? Because obviously they're in your house. You see them.
Yeah. No, of course. I mean, like I have posters of my own books in my office, right? I have little foam boards. I have my little stack of books here. Like I'm very proud of them. Like I think about, I look at my first book and I look at my most recent book and I could see the way I've grown as a writer and as a professional in the industry, of course. But I don't know. I think my big reaction whenever I look at them is I hope my kid is proud of me when he gets older and he understands what I've been doing. I hope he looks at them and he's like, oh, wow, dad tried his best and this helped pay for college. Like I hope there's something in there that he appreciates. But that's kind of it there. Like I look at them, I feel proud. I think about the writers who helped me work on them, and I look at the blurbs from those authors and I think about their books. But mostly I think about my kid and what my writing will hopefully, I don't know, what it'll say to him when he picks them up. Right now he's 5. So right now the extent of the conversation is him seeing my picture on the back and Daddy. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. And that's it. That's all he gets.
Yeah. I mean, I have no doubt you're going to try and, we always try. There's no guarantees. And I'm not a parent, but like, I know that, readers always try to, encourage reading. Right. And I can only imagine you're not going to be like, only read my books, because that's not a thing any of us do. But like, is there, a part of you that's like, I'm all right if he never reads my books?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. Like my wife doesn't really read my book. She read Jagged Little Pill because she was sort of a little more curious about that one. But like they might not be for him. He might not be interested in those, and that's totally fine. Yeah, my parents don't read my books. They demand a copy when they come out, but they don't.
That's yeah. I like to tell people in any creative space, do not rely on your closest circle
Oh no,
really. Like I talked to somebody in podcasting, and I don't remember if it was on the episode or not. It might have been during like the in between parts, but he was like, I don't understand why strangers will listen to me, but people that I know don't. And I was like, that's just the internet. Like, I think that's just the nature of everything, really. Like, with the exception of like movie premieres where like there's a big event and you can invite people and people want to be seen. And I'm sure we could say the same thing about book premieres. When there's an event, people will be there. The difference being that at a movie premiere, most people stay to watch the movie. And at a book premiere, it's not like, okay, everybody sit down and read. which I think would be wonderful, actually. But, you know, there are always going to be strangers that are closer to your work than the people that are closer to you.
Oh no, I definitely agree. Yeah, I love all my friends terribly, but like my closest friends, you know, my childhood friends who like have characters named after them in my books, they don't read them, but they're also not readers, you know, they're not big book nerds the way I am, and I don't really expect them to. You know, whenever I send one of them one of my books, I like highlight the part where I give them a shout out, or I put a post-it note to like point to the acknowledgments so they see it. But it's okay that it's not for them, you know?
How do you handle not being surrounded by readers? Like I'm lucky in that I kind of am. I think my friend circle is now readers. For a while, I was the only reader. Which I don't know about you, but like it always frustrated me because like now I can just be like, here's a book, read it. And I know he will get to it eventually, or my partner will, or somebody will. Right. But when I was alone, it was like, oh crap, I have nobody to talk to about this.
I mean, my friends, like a lot of my friends who aren't big readers, like most of my closest friends, they don't mind hearing about the books that I'm reading. Like they have no choice. Like I will gush about something that I'm reading, and that's fine. You know, and I do have, you know, a lot of buddies here in Philly who are readers, but they don't read YA books, or they don't read rom-coms. My closest dad friend who lives a couple blocks away from me only reads nonfiction. That's it. You know, and we'll go to the library together, and he will pick up the most boring book about like the history of salt or something. And I'm like, well, how do you read that? What is that? I want to read about this rom-com. You know, I want to read this. I want to read that. But I don't know, like having people that like things that are so different from what you are drawn to makes life interesting. You know, like now I know more about the history of salt because of him. He read a book about how paper is made, and I don't care about how paper is made. I care about the books being made, but now I know more about that because he's gonna tell me.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I've kind of taken it upon myself to diversify my own reading.
Yeah.
So it's like I'll alternate between fiction and non, and I try not to read the same thing like within like a 4-book cycle. So even if I'm reading through an author or a series, like there'll be a few books in between. And that's just because I want to challenge myself. I feel like I'm alone though. I feel like there's a lot of people, and my partner's one of them, who's like, she's like, this is what I want to read. And I will read like 4 of these books in a week, but they're all kind of the same. I just can't do that.
Eric and I had a great discussion, and while I enjoyed talking about post-publishing ownership and the importance of young adult fiction, there's one piece that's truly worth revisiting: the idea of not knowing. As a person old enough to remember a time before Google, I can also remember that while the internet existed, search results were sometimes murky at best. We did the best with what we had, but it often resulted in contacting the person in your friend group with the most knowledge about the subject in question. now most of us pick up our phones. I have decided not to do so. If I don't know the name of an actor or the year something was founded and I'm not doing anything productive with that information, I let it be. I've learned to become comfortable saying, I don't know. It's a skill most people lack today. Are you willing to learn it? Maybe, but will knowing the year that a certain movie was released really enhance your life? Odds are it won't. So learn to be comfortable not knowing things. And the next time you think you need to look up that piece of inane trivia that comes up in a conversation, let it be. I promise you won't be missing anything at all. Thanks for listening to The Palmer Files, episode 108. And now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can find all related ways to contact myself and my guest, Eric Smith, in the show notes. There you can find a link to Eric's website, ericsmithrocks.com, for access to all of his books, plus information on query tips and much, much more. Again, that's ericsmithrocks.com. The music for this episode was provided by Henno Heiter. Email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. All right, Eric, do you have one final question for me?
So, we talked a little bit about you diversifying your reading and everything. Like, what are the 2 books you've read recently that are spectacularly different from one another?
Oh, boy. 2 books that are spectacularly different from one another that recently. Well, I mean, I will say, I just finished reading Fumbling the Future, which was the history of the Xerox PARC facility, which is kind of like the Bell Labs of the 1940s and 50s, but was out west and basically created the personal computer before 5 or 6 years before anybody else did. And Xerox didn't market it properly. And having read the history of technology, right? This book, I wasn't sure what to make of this book, but this is always the book everybody refers to. And, the book was published in 1988. So like it's very close. Those people are still working in that industry, right? Apple and Macintosh are big. The IBM PC and clones are all over the place and by 88, but really the explosion's just still kind of going up. But I didn't know what to expect from the book other than it's been mentioned in a lot of other books I've read. So I read it, and it was very business oriented. It was a lot more on the corporate side of decision making than it was on the science end, which makes it very different than most of the things I read. Before that, I had read a spy fiction piece about the Cold War. So those things are, well, it was actually about the end of the Cold War. So technically both books happen within the same decade or two, but they are so vastly different. And I think I enjoy that a lot, actually. In fact, that's actually them being in the same decade actually puts them oddly more together than the usual. Cause it'll, like I'm actually in between books right now. And so it's, I don't know actually what's next. But before we got on to record, I was wandering around my house looking at my bookshelves going like, what's the next book going to be? Because I am, my listeners are sick of hearing this, but I'm reading every book in my house.
Nice.
There are going to be some books that are going to be slogs, but like it also means like, well, what's it going to be? What's next? And I basically give myself maybe 48 hours to decide before I just pick up whatever I feel like or whatever's there and just keep going.
Yeah.
I don't know. Part of it is kind of selfish in that I read 2 spy fictions back to back, and when I finished the second one, I couldn't remember what happened in which book. And I needed the palate cleanser to be able to review both of them, but also I was kind of like, I don't know if I want, like, I know people that just read the same thing, but there was a part of me that was like, I just need a change. I just need to expand it a bit. Kind of like I don't think I'll ever go back for a master's degree, but I can educate myself in my own curriculum if I'm, look, I'm 40 and I grew up in an era where being well-rounded was the thing to be.
Yeah.
Which is weird because as I look for a full-time gig, people are like, you're well-rounded. We don't want you. You don't have a specialization. And then when I try and be specialized, they're like, well, you're not that well-rounded. I'm like, yeah, wow. Oh, I can't win at all here. But I feel like I get better perspective overall by just diversifying what I'm intaking.
That makes sense to me.
And young adult is part of it. Like I have a bunch of them. I just, it's weird. I have these I end up with relationships with authors like yourself. And, look, first of all, I'm not asking, but like occasionally they'll be like, hey, I just wrote this thing. Do you want to take a look as an advance or, do a review?
Yeah.
And I've gotten to a point now where I don't ask what the book's about anymore. Because it's something new. And obviously if I have a relationship with you, I've probably read something you've already, so I'm already familiar with your style, even if you change it. So it's really just, okay. All right. Eric sent me a book. That'll go on the list, right? Like I don't have to worry about like, what is it? Like I'll figure it out. I talk about this all the time, but I read, The Magus by John Fowles, and a third of the way through the book, I didn't know what I was reading.
Yeah.
I read, it's like 800 pages. So like 200, 300 pages in, I was still not sure what I was reading. And then it all just clicked, but you have to go along for that ride. So I feel like, I have limited my book purchasing because I still have I'm still not at 50% of reading through my house. Cause I've been a collector and, an aggregator, like as my grandparents' generation has died off, I've also inherited a lot of books. But before I get rid of them, I want to read them to make sure they're not worth keeping, I guess.
Of course. Yeah.
So again, the new books, I'm reading a lot of older things, but it's the diversification. And I think that perspective is important as I, actively try and spend less time on my phone and on algorithm-based media where it's like, all right, well, no, this would have never been suggested to you.
Yeah.
But I liked it. And I think that's kind of where I'm at. It's weird, but it's good, I think. What about, do you attempt to diversify, or is it just, I'm interested in this?
Yeah. So like I read what I think will inform my writing and my job, but a lot of that stuff is still for pleasure. It still makes me really happy. Like I read a lot of adult rom-coms, not just because I want to work on them, but because I think the dialogue in romantic comedy can teach you so much about how to write people talking. in a way that sounds really natural and organic and just real. Romance authors are just unbeatable when it comes to that, because people just talk because they're talking and they're getting to know one another. That's how romance novels work. I read a lot of, well, no, actually, no, I don't read the books. I do audiobooks, which of course is still reading. I do a lot of memoir on audio, a lot of like old true crime on audio. God, I just did The Indifferent Stars Above on audio, which was just incredible. Oh my God. Although the whole history of the Donner Party and what happened to them going out west. Oh geez. The narrator has like the kind of voice that makes you want to fall asleep while you're listening to it, but you shouldn't, because it's a horrible story and you don't want that you don't want that working its way into your dreams.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
But I just finished that recently, and I also just finished Sammy Espinosa's final review by Taylor K. Mejia, which was like a really lovely romance about a music journalist who ends up falling for the guy she's on a mission to cover, and has to hide the fact that she's a journalist, and it's so good and so funny. So yeah, I read a little bit all over the place, but it's always stuff that's going to also inform my own writing and my job, even if it's for pleasure. Because I don't know, I don't have time to read I'm trying to think of something that I would maybe read just for fun. I don't know, a lot of my friends read a lot of literary fiction. I don't really work on it. I don't necessarily want to read it for fun because I don't know, it doesn't entertain me as much as more traditional and upmarket or genre blending fiction does, the sort of stuff that I do work on. So yeah, I read diversely as long as it's it sounds selfish, but as long as it's helping me.